understanding. You know, Jonathan Swift said months ago, law is like a spider's web. It catches the gnats and flies and lets the wasps and hornets go free. So there's a kind of, there's something about what's the relation between legal systems as they really exist, just to be realistic about them. There's maybe, but in practice, and it's not only that legal systems let the powerful people break free of them, but they actually provide a lot of instruments for people who are powerful, who are innocent, to escape from any kind of accountability, liability. So how do you think about this? Is this just a recent problem? Is it embedded in the way our legal systems work, or is it something that's actually remediable? We could remedy by some kind of legislative changes or by activism. So really, how much is what's happening a deviation from the way legal systems ordinarily function throughout?
Well, I think that raises an interesting paradox, because on the one hand, you can't find a more vociferous and cynical critic of the legal system than I am, which is why, in part, I don't do it any longer. And I think that it's unbelievably frustrating, inadequate, and unjust and unfair in ways that we could spend the rest of the day counting and describing. On the other hand, there's really no alternative other than to agree that we're all going to live under its purview, because the only alternative, as John Adams pointed out, was if we're not going to be a nation of laws, we're going to be a nation of men, which means we'll just be governed by the will, the unrestrained will of whoever happens to wield political power at any given moment. Those are really the only two alternatives. So as unsatisfying as the rule of law often is, and as porous its holes are, and as inconsistent and unfair as its outcomes typically are, it's really, I think, the duty of everybody to insist upon adherence to it, because really all the rule of law to me is the ground rules to which we all agree, by which we all agree to be governed, before anything else happens, regardless of who happens to be empowered at any given moment. And it really goes back to the first question that you asked me, in that way that I described I look at the political process, with the Constitution just simply marking the outer boundaries beyond which we all agree the government can never go, and that political officials can never go, no matter what the political vicissitudes of the moment are, no matter what the majority happens to want, that there will be prohibitions and then punishments if those lines are crossed, because those are the lines we decide we simply can never tolerate allowing the government to go beyond. And so, once we say that we're going to live under the rule of law, what that essentially means is that we all live by the same rules, the same guidelines, the same standards, and that there will be punishments for deviations, which will provide the incentive for people not to do them. And once you decide that you're not going to live under that system, which we've decided, at least for political elites, that we no longer will, then essentially we become a society governed by the rule of man, the rule of political leaders, who can decide that they will do whatever they want at any given moment. And I think if you can look back at our history, and you've seen some of the most politically powerful, the most financially empowered people punished for legal transgression. So it's not the case that the rule of law intrinsically favors the political elite or the financial elite, or that there will always be a lack of accountability within the system. We've seen it applied with a fair degree of equality and rigor, not perfect, but certainly far better than we have now. We've really gotten to the point where we've explicitly adopted the view, and you can go and pick up any newspaper or magazine and see people saying this outright, that people who wield political power, who are in government, when they break the law, that criminal prosecutions and investigations are not appropriate responses to that law breaking, because it will create a cycle of retaliation, because it ends up being distracting, because we have really beautiful things to look to in our future, and we don't want to get caught up in the ugliness of the past. And so we really adopted this explicit idea that we have a two-tiered system of justice, that the rule of law is now only for essentially ordinary people, for the masses, that the elite are essentially immunized from its consequences. And a two-tiered system of justice is no system of justice. I mean, if the rule of law doesn't apply equally, then it doesn't exist. And to me, if you ask me what I thought the first and most important priority was in terms of changing the political dynamic and reawakening people to some of the problems that we have, it would be this problem, the problem that the rule of law no longer exists because we've exempted the elite, which means that we don't have a system of ground rules to which we agree, and we have no means of restraining the political and financial elite when they engage in wrongdoing.
So, and as you've written,